Hello everybody, and welcome to another exciting adventure of Get Your Bush On. As always, I am Randy the Goblin. What we're going to be penning for you today is something very special. It's a part 2 of something that she painted earlier. I feel terrible right now. Why do I feel so bad? What the heck? Ah, he made me sick. Ah. Hello again. This is Elysian Dame with the Brush, and today I'm going to be painting for you a Plague Bearer of Nurgle. Now, this particular one is the one that's going to be riding on the back of the Rotfly that I painted for you earlier. And the best way that I know how to at least get these guys set up is, see, I've got a toothpick kind of shoved up his hole there. So it's a lot easier to paint all sides of them, just like that. See? And this is another one that you can base in black, or you can base in Castellan green, or, you know, whatever green primer base they've got going for us. Because I'm just going to coat the whole model pretty much in this, you know, with the exception of the sword. And, like, the horn. Hopefully the guts, but, you know, we'll see. Alright, now that the Castellan green is dry and based all over it, you know, even getting, you know, all up in the undercarriage here, and under the arms and chin and all that good stuff. Don't miss anywhere. Because you never know when somebody's going to pick up your model and whoop, flip it upside down. Because I will do that. If I ever find you, I will do that. The next color, if you haven't guessed already, is going to be Lothran Forest. And that's just going to be our first layer paint. Now, I realize that if you've been watching like all of my Nurgle videos, you may see a pattern in the greens that I'm using. The reason for this is because I'm painting an entire army. So, in order to make the entire army stick out, all the Nurgle units are looking pretty much the same. That way, there's no doubt about it, you know, this is one cohesive army. And I find that that's the best way to do it, is you find a color scheme that you like, and you go with it. I mean, there'll be certain variations here and there, but for the most part, a lot of the basing and a lot of the skin is going to be pretty much the same. You can kind of go with the whole motto of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Alright, so now that the Lothran Forest has been applied, as you can see, it's kind of a thicker layer. You can see some of the Castellan green still kind of peeking out in the low areas again, but for the most part, what you're seeing is the Lothran Forest. And now we're going to pull out the Straken green. Straken. Whatever. You can see it's clearly labeled green out. And this is going to be a light dry brush on the skin. So, as before, you wipe most of it off your brush. And then just kind of wipe down the model like so. See? Alright, so now that the Straken has been applied, you can see it's just a light dry brush over the top, and we've got some nice 3 layers of skin here going. So, because the model is so small, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the Elysian green next. And we're going to pull out every last one of those little pimples. Pimples, blemishes, boils, whatever. I suppose in this case they're boils because, you know, Plague Bearer. Boils are one of the plagues. So, as you can see, just pull them all out with that Elysian green, just like you did the toad and just like you did the rotfly. Alright, now that we pulled out all the boils with the Elysian green, as you can see, this poor guy's got a whole bunch of them, especially on his face. So, I guess he's a poor pockmarked teen. Alright, so the next step is to give each one of these little guys a white head. And of course, we pull out the Ogryn Camo for that. And if you've watched any of my other videos on these guys, you know all you do is just put a little dot of the Ogre Camo on top of the boil, and you're done with that. Alright, as you can see, I've got the Ogryn Camo dotted all throughout my fun little lumpy boils here. Now, I'm going to pull out my Athonian Camoshade, and I'm basically just going to wipe this all over the model. I'm going to do it evenly and try not to get it pooling too many places. You know, you don't want to use too much, but you know, enough to give it some nice definition. As you can see, like right there, that's a little much, so I end up pulling it out. See, because that's better. Just like that. Alright, now that the wash has dried, we're going to work on the guts. And the way that we do that is we pull out Screamer Pink. And just go over all of the guts that are in there. There are also some open gaping wounds on this guy, like the arm, like the butt here, back of the... We're also going to fill those in with the Screamer Pink as well. Alright, so that Screamer Pink's in there now, on all the open gashes too, as well as the organs. Now to highlight those organs and make them look a little bit more organy, we're going to pull out the Pink Horror. And just kind of go over these intestines here with the Pink Horror. Now, to be fair, that's going to make them look really bright to begin with. But we're going to wash them after they dry, and it won't look as bright anymore. It'll darken them up. I'm also going to take the Pink Horror and kind of highlight, do some highlighting in the gashes, because they're not just gashes, they're kind of open sores. So there's some flesh kind of in there. So just putting just a tiny bit of the Pink Horror kind of brightens them up and gives them a little bit more of a dimension. While we're letting the horror paint dry, I'm going to pull out the Ushtabi bone, and I'm going to use that to kind of pull out the teeth here, and the toenails. Alright, so now that we've got the teeth and the toenails on, we're going to work on the sword just a little bit with some Leadbelcher. Be sure to shake up your Leadbelcher and any kind of metallic paints that you get, because they do have a tendency to separate. And if they're not shaken up real good, they don't work very well. And we're just going to coat the whole thing in the Leadbelcher. Alright, so while the Leadbelcher is drying on the sword here, we're going to go to the horn now with some Skavenblight Dinge. And all that happens here is the horn gets covered with it. Again, while we're still waiting for all of this stuff to dry so we can wash it, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the eye with some Wild Rider Red. Now, most of this guy's eye is covered up by all of those boily pustules, so it's kind of hard to get at. So you end up having to be very, very careful on your placement. See, I got it in the center of the eye right there. So careful, in fact, I don't think I can get this on camera and do it. So I'm going to cut it. Alright. So as you can see, mine ended up just a little messy, but I basically just turned that into glow. So I just got it on the edges of the pustules here to be glow effect. Now if you mess up even more than that, you can always go back in with this Castellan and just kind of touch up. Just tiny bits, because the Castellan is close enough to the color that the skin has turned out that it won't look too weird to do that. Alright, so the next color, Tau Light Ochre. Yay! Again. I tell you, I've liked doing these videos, but I kind of can't wait to get onto something different as far as the paint scheme goes. There we go. There's his pupil. Last color, Flash Glitz Yellow. Woo! Right there in the very center. Oop. So it might look just a little messy right at the moment, but we're going to wash it and then we're going to go back over it again, so it'll get fixed. Alright, so now that the horn's dried a little bit more, we're going to put some Administratum Gray on it, just a kind of a detail. Okay, pinpoint highlight, I think is what I've been calling it, on the horn. And the pinpoint is just going to go along this edge here. Let me see if I can get this edge here and kind of arrow it at the bottom. And again, this is kind of a difficult process for me to do with my brush all the way out. So, okay, so this is how the pinpoint highlight ended up. You can see I traced along the edge here, I arrowed at the bottom, and then I repeated the process on the sides and the back. Now as you can see, I kind of left this part out right here. That was on purpose because that's kind of a shaded area anyway, so it doesn't make sense to go all the way up. Alright. So, now it's time for washes. Yeah. Alright, so let's start with the tip of the toes. And the tip of the toes we're going to do with Agrex Earthshade. Just gonna paint his toenails brown. And then move on. So moving on up from the toes, we have Carroburg Crimson. And that's gonna go into all of our open wounds and into the guts here to give the guts some dimension and to darken up that pink horror. Moving right along to the next wash, we're going to use Nuln oil. And the Nuln oil is going to go on the sword, in the mouth, and on the horn. I find that the best way to clean up teeth, if you weren't extremely careful with it, and honestly, even if I am careful with it, I do it anyway, is just wash the mouth with the Nuln oil, and that'll help pull all the teeth back out. It's kind of the dental wash. Okay, and then you wash the horn as well to kind of dial back that Administratum highlight. And of course you wash the sword just so it'll darken up real nice. We're gonna do some other things with the sword, so we want that metal to have darkened up and pitted looking. Alright, so before we let all this dry, the last little bit is, of course, going to be the Bloodletter Glaze, and that's going to go on the eyeball. There's one other thing that I wanted to tell you guys about, is that when you're washing, you want to be very careful about things that have swords, well, holes in them. Because well, in this case, the sword. See the holes? Now the problem with the wash is, for some reason, if you let the wash pool into any hole, it will dry, and it will dry solid, so you lose your hole. So you lose that hole factor. Ha 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 ha. So when you're washing something, be very careful about covering those holes. Because if you cover the hole, it'll stay covered. It won't go away. Because the wash is basically really watered down paint in a way. So that pigment all pools there and becomes rock hard at the end. So just be careful about that. Alright, now that all those beautiful washes have dried, we're going to go back and we're going to put some rust marks on this pitted sword of his. And the way that we do that is, the first color we start with is Rhinox hide. gonna knock him over with a paint jar. And what you do is you kind of pick a couple of places where you want the rust to be. And just kind of apply it here and there. Just like so. Alright, so the next color that we're going to do to get the rust effect is going to be Skrag Brown. And the way that you do this is you kind of just apply it inside where we did the you just put the Skrag Brown inside the area where of the Rhinox hide. So you leave a little bit of that Rhinox hide out, like showing. It's kind of concentric circles almost. Alright, so now that the Skrag Brown has dried a little bit, the next color that we're going to apply, and basically the last color, is going to be Wild Rider Red. Now, you can utilize a different color. Troll Slayer Orange would probably be another color that you could use instead of the Wild Rider Red. The only reason why I'm using the Wild Rider is because I've done a couple of these at this point, and that's what I've used. But the other thing is I don't really have much in the way. I mean, we just got the Troll Slayer, and I've already done the rest of the army in this kind of bright, rusty sword color. But for you guys at home, if you wanted to do a different color, it would be the Troll Slayer instead. As you can see, I've got it in there as well, and again, it's just concentric circles. Alright, as you can see, it's a little difficult to see the eye at this point, but I kind of like the effect that the Glaze has had on it. It's almost like it's glowing a lot more than it should be. But the last step in doing the eye is, again, the Flash Glitz Yellow and the pupil. Just to kind of punch it up to make him have a pupil. I'm going to end up doing this off camera because it's kind of hard to bend around to where you can see. But there. So there's your eyeball. Alright, so next thing we might as well go ahead and do is get started with a technical paint. First off, Blood for the Blood God. And this is going to go in our open wounds, our gashes, and of course along the organs. I'm also going to smear it kind of around said open wounds and stuff like that to kind of show that there is kind of blood kind of oozing out of him. Alright, so now that we've gotten the Blood for the Blood God kind of smeared on the open wounds and the cuts and kind of smeared downward to kind of show some blood like kind of trailing out of them, kind of oozing. Yay. We're going to pull out the Nurgles Rot and go over all of the pustules, boils, whatever you want to call them. So all you do is just kind of go over each one to kind of give it that pussy, wonderful shine. Be sure to mix your technical paints. Shake them real good because they tend to separate. Alright, so now that all the pustules and boils or whatever are all nice and shiny and gross looking, I've also taken some of the Nurgle's rot and just lightly brushed it inside of these wounds to kind of make them look nasty and infected. So one of the last things I'm going to do is, notice how bright and lovely my rust on the sword looks? Well, I'm actually going to dull that up. And to do that, I'm going to use some Seraphim Sepia. And I'm just going to apply it all over the blade to kind of just dull up what we need to dull up. And what this is going to do is it's going to end up making the blade look kind of yucky too. Alright, after the blade dries, I realized that I kind of skipped a step. Before you do the Nurgle's rot and the blood for the blood god, you might want to dry brush the skin with a little bit of the Underhive flesh. I went back and I kind of fixed my own mistake. As you can see, just lighten the skin in certain places, you know, make it look good. Also on the toenails here, you do just a little bit of a Tyrant skull highlight, just on top. And now the last thing to do on the sword is I'm going to take the Nurgle's rod again and kind of apply it just here and there on the blade, so that his blade is kind of like this diseased, oozy, covered thing. So it's all nice and gunky and nasty looking. And I mean, you can do this step, you can skip this step. If you'd rather have it be bloody, you can. I just prefer, like, because, you know, he's a Plague Bearer, so I figure his blade should not only be rusty, but probably dipped in some kind of, you know, yuck to cause anybody who lives to be horribly, horribly diseased. You know, makes sense to me. And so you're done. That's how to paint up a nice looking Plague Bearer of Nurgle. Just like that. Now, of course, if you've got Rotfly, like I do, next step would be to attach it. And there you have it. One totally completed Plague Bearer of Nurgle on Rotfly back. Of course, if you want to see how to paint the Rotfly, you go to my How to Paint a Rotfly video. But that's it. Questions and comments, leave them below. As always, if you have a request for something you want to see me paint, I'll do my best to oblige. If you want me to paint something for you specifically as far as commission goes, I do those as well. The email to contact me is going to be below as well. Thanks for watching.